Welcome to the video on RDA for non-catalogers who work with MARC records. This video is intended to give you a basic background to understand what you see in the catalog when you see new RDA MARC records, which have been added both to our catalog and in the copy cataloging master records in WorldCat. From now on, we'll see a rapid increase in the number of RDA formatted records in our catalog and elsewhere. Hopefully this information will help to get you started with making sense of it all. There will be follow-up information sessions for all library staff and RDA later on, which will help to explain the broader picture of RDA. The aim of this video is to help you understand how the records will be changing and to understand what these changes are and that they're not mistakes. If you attend one of the follow-up sessions, which I recommend you do, you will learn more about the whys of RDA. Let's begin by considering that AACR2, the rules for cataloging that have been in use for about 4 decades, were created with a card catalog in mind. This was a situation where catalogers were trying to squeeze as much information as possible into a tiny card. In addition to that, the rules were Anglo-American cataloging rules, which assumed that those reading the catalog records would be English speakers, and that they would be reading catalog records that were also written in English. Even today, we see a lot of evidence in our catalog records of those old card catalog days. We see the terms et al. We also see others such as SL or SN, say when we can't find the place of publication or the name of a publisher. Now, we can write things out in full in the computer, and we don't need to abbreviate words anymore, but our rules have never caught up to that fact. Also, our library users are culturally and linguistically more diverse than they were before. The use of Latin and abbreviations are generally not all that as well understood in this diverse environment. This can make our catalog records very confusing to a large segment of our users. I won't get into the theory behind RDA, but the impact of using RDA with our MARC records includes the following. Many abbreviations are gone. Latin terminology is replaced with full English language terms. Rules for capitalization and punctuation have been changed to reflect more closely what is seen on the resource itself. Rules about fixing mistakes as they were found on the original resource have been changed. Rules about how titles are recorded and how many titles should be recorded have changed. Rules about which authors or creators get listed in a record have changed. New fields and subfields have been added. These fields give more detail about the type of medium on which the information is found, the format of the resource, and other details such as the role various individuals played in creating the resource. In general, RDA records are fuller or contain more complete information about the resource and do so in a fuller, clearer form of the language. It is true that there is less consistency in appearance relative to what we're accustomed to seeing with AACR2 records. However, where consistency is essential for search and retrieval of information, consistency is retained. More flexibility is allowed in those fields which are used primarily for display purposes. To use the remote searching function to locate records, please note that you may find RDA records which do not contain the General Material Designator Code, or GMD. This is the code you will find in the titles of materials such as electronic resource, video recording, or sound recording. In the next 3 years, the GMD will disappear completely from catalog records. For the time being, our library will retain them, but many other libraries have decided to remove the GMD from their records completely. So you may have to look at records a little more closely when you're searching remotely. So let's have a look at the details of what you can expect to see in RDA records now and in the future. Seeing as not all staff look primarily in Millennium, which is the cataloging module in our integrated library software system, and also because we don't have a really big variety of records in our catalog right now, I'll look at generic MARC records as they can be found in our OPAC or from other library systems. So let's get started and have a look. So we'll start with the MARC view of a record from our catalog. This is a good place to begin. So maybe you notice a record that looks a little different than what you're accustomed to. Open it up and have a look at it. Make sure you're in MARC view. Begin by looking at the 040 or 040 field. There is a new subfield here. You'll notice I have it in a box. It's the E subfield, and we can see that the code RDA is entered there. This tells me, when I see it, that the record is coded in RDA. That can explain why it looks different. This coding may be missing in a few records which really are coded RDA. They might have been done a while ago and this particular detail got missed. If you believe a record that has been coded in RDA but this field is missing, you can report it to the cataloging supervisor or myself, and one of us will investigate. So now that we've got the first part done, let's move on and look at other parts of the record. That catalogers are taught when they use RDA is to take what you see and accept what you get. When people talk about this at conferences, they'll say it over and over again. Take what you see and accept what you get. This means that with RDA records, information that is found on a resource is much more likely to be literally transcribed from the resource relative to what catalogers used to do with AACR2. There are instructions to not abbreviate, omit, or correct what is found on the resource. We can have a look at the training example below to show how this plays out in the real world. 245 field. This is the title field, which also contains information which we call the statement of responsibility. This field demonstrates the take what you see and accept what you get principle. First of all, notice that vegetable is misspelled. There's no attempt to fix it, at least not in this field. In the world of interacting computer programs that read fields literally, as well as an environment where there are a lot of multilingual users who may not be able to detect a spelling mistake on the title page of a book, there's now a good reason to keep the record of a title exactly as it is found on a resource. Yes, I know what you're thinking. It's true that our OPAC is not configured to handle this, and it looks like we've made a mistake. That's something that will have to be dealt with later, but RDA has a way to deal with it right now. We'll look at that. For now, note that the mistake was literally transcribed into the 245 field, and also keep in mind that in our current computing and culture environment, this is something that we need to do for things to work properly in the big picture. So, I know it's hard, but that's one of the big changes that RDA brings that seems like a little thing, but it actually in some ways kind of goes against some of the things that we've done for many years. So let's have a look at the second part of the 245 field, which is the statement of responsibility. This is generally information about who's responsible for creating the resource, and it's taken from a title page or whatever might be the equivalent to a title page for the resource. In AACR2, there was a rule of 3, which said that we could only list up to 3 people and use the abbreviation et al. Or ETAL to indicate others. RDA allows libraries to continue to use the rule of 3, but it recommends that it list out full statements of responsibility exactly as they are found on the resource, and to only make small changes or additions in order to make clarifications. Okay, for those of you with a sharp eye, you may notice that ISBD punctuation isn't followed exactly in this example. Good eye for sure. Maybe I can recruit you. RDA does not require ISBD punctuation. However, punctuation sometimes has a function in the display of records. If this specific type of punctuation isn't used, the leader should be coded to reflect that. But that's getting a little more detailed than I was intending. The key point is to show you that the strict type of punctuation that we might be familiar with may not always be present in RDA records. And if that's the case, it's all right. Now let's have a look at how RDA deals with spelling and other mistakes in a title. To review, RDA requires catalogers to take what they see and accept what they get. So, what is found in the 245 will literally be what the cataloger found on the resource. Yet, in our example, we want our users to be able to search using the correct spelling. We do this in RDA by adding a 246 field, which contains the title with the word vegetable spelled correctly. Notice too the inclusion of the subfield I, which contains the text corrected title. Our current OPAC doesn't interpret this coding and won't display the 246 in this case in an optimal way, which is to say the title with the spelling corrected should appear as the main title, but it currently will not. This is something that will need to be reconfigured for our future OPACs. In records coded according to AACR2, you will see notes in a 500 field about variant titles, such as where the title came from or if there were mistakes. By putting a corrected title into a 246 field and adding a subfield to specify why that additional title was added, allows for much more power and flexibility for both searching and displaying records in the future. Thinking about how titles in RDA can be recorded differently than what we're accustomed to, let's have a look at how a parallel title, which is generally a title written in a language other than the main title, is often recorded in RDA. In AACR2 records, parallel titles are generally recorded directly in the 245 field and indicated by an equal sign. In RDA records, you may still find a parallel title in the 245 field. However, seeing as listing a parallel title this way is often confusing for users and can interfere with searching and often does not reflect what is literally found on the resource, RDA discourages the inclusion of the parallel title in the 245. So, what does RDA prefer? What you would typically find in an RDA record is an additional 246, which contains the parallel title. In the case of this record, the indicators are used to denote that a parallel title is contained in the field. Notice too that the 246 is used even though there is a uniform title in the 240 field. Catalogers need to continue to use uniform titles because of the link that the 240 makes to the authority record, which in this case could help to redirect users to this record if they happen to search on one of the other known variations to this title. Those variations do not need to appear on the resource that is cataloged. This is one of the benefits of authority records. As long as the record contains the 240 with the uniform title, searchers who use another variation on the title will be redirected to all the other records that contain the same 240 field. In the 246 field in this record, it's specific to the item cataloged and not all versions of the same work. By including both a 246 and a 240, we can currently enrich the searching capability of our records and will hopefully help to improve the clarity of display of records in the future. Keep in mind that RDA stands for Resource Description and Access, and the key goals of RDA are to create descriptions that are clearer and more meaningful for users, while increasing the accessibility of resources by making them more discoverable. This is why we often find fields which appear redundant in RDA records. While they appear redundant in this case, the 240 and 246 fields are performing a slightly different function. Does this seem a little too technical? Don't worry about it. The key point is to remember that RDA can represent the title of an item in various ways and in multiple fields. If you see this, it's not a mistake or careless cataloging. It's a way of making the resources easier to find. Let's focus on some of the fields that have more to do with describing the resource. Notice that many of the familiar abbreviations are now gone in this record. If your player has a pause button, you might want to hit it now to have a closer look. RDA is not highly strict, which means that when you look at RDA records created by different libraries, you might be able to see that the same information is expressed in different ways. Over time, there may be consistency in what you may see across libraries, but then again, this consistency may never develop because it's not actually required. At this point, the key is to let you know that the general lack of abbreviations, as well as some inconsistencies in how the information in these fields is recorded, is considered acceptable in RDA. What is important is that each type of information is recorded in the appropriate field or subfield for that type. We'll look at more examples of these types of fields later on. Because RDA may be new to you, I've broken up the information videos into parts. After watching this first video, I encourage you to review it if you would like to, and then continue on to the other videos and possibly attend one of the live sessions on the theoretical aspects of RDA. Perhaps at this point you feel that you have enough information about RDA and you choose not to watch the other videos. That's your choice. However, please keep the links to the videos since you may wish to watch them in the future. Considering that the implementation of RDA is just the beginning of many changes which will dramatically transform the way libraries create metadata, you may find that the information that appears obscure and maybe of little consequence to you today, it may start to impact your day-to-day work at the library in ways that we can't predict now. So I'll leave you with a few key points from this video, which you can read. Thank you for your time. I look forward to the next video and having a chance to look at additional ways that RDA has changed MARC records. Bye for now.